really nice to be with you. Thank you so much for joining me for this presentation today. I have tried to really think through how I could be a benefit at this conference. I'm a performing arts person, but also do some writing and some mentoring. And I've been thinking a lot about how I might be able to help you as creatives deal with some things that inevitably come up, I think, when we live in a creative world and when we contribute to it. So I'm going to go ahead. Time is short. I'll do a screen share now, and let's get started. So the presentation that I'm going to talk about today is getting out of the Muse's way and unblocking your creative self. I have been thinking about how when everything works, we don't need any help. But boy, when it doesn't, the struggles that come up and the questions that come up and all of the things that come up that block us or that keep us from really shining the way we could shine, those things are really, really tough to manage. So today I want to talk a little bit about you and also about the Muse, at least the way I will treat the Muse. So you're bringing what you bring as a creative, your talent and whatever your background of training might be, and your good intentions and your commitment. And that's you over there. You know, you've got the toolkit and you're ready to make something out of that. And then there is the other part of this, the Muse. And the Muse is hard to get a handle on. Mysterious being, mysterious thing, filled with inspiration that we want to try to access, and interested in results. For me, this is really interesting as a way to think about the Muse. The Muse wants a result. And the Muse wants this kind of interaction between the you, the me, and what gets made. And so between those two things is this place where it gets made, this gap. And I've begun to use this word between as a noun, the between. This actually comes from a book on alchemy. And she starts writing about the between that takes place, this energetic place in between me and whatever this inspiration might be. Somebody asked me a question in my lifetime. I think it was right after I went to New York. And they asked this question: do you want to be a conductor or do you want to conduct? This was actually a great question because it posed the issue of, did I want a role or an activity? If I had a role, I had a title and people could call me maestro, and that's what it is to be a conductor. Or did I want to conduct? Did I want to work with music in a way that I had to intersect with people? And that was a moment when I had some inkling, no, I want to be in process. So all of us, I think, know about this idea of flow, this wonderful theory about getting into this place where time stops and we just engage in process. And I got interested in this artist's, this writer's thinking when he said things are in balance. So skills are balanced against the challenges. Conditions get in balance with the way you might get results. Work gets in balance with the concept of play. The small piece of us that is the thinking thing gets in balance with this larger uber self. Fear gets in balance with courage. And when that happens, and this sort of thing happens, everything sort of falls away. And what's left is process. And then it all is feeling good. And all of a sudden, one can come to this. I don't know if you've had it happen. I certainly have had it happen, where in the course of being a creative, I feel like all the thing that was moving suddenly isn't moving anymore. And the Muse has gotten silent on me. It's really not a great place to be. Frankly, it's a very lonely place. You have a lot of things that come up psychologically that happen right now. You begin to talk about yourself and to yourself. You feel like a fraud to anybody who says, oh, you are, and then they say lovely things about you. Even though you're doing what you're doing, you just feel like, where is the Muse? What's going on here? And this door feels closed. And then the natural thing that comes out is, well, who sent the muse away? Because this presence that was here is no longer here. And the bad news, the answer to that is you did, I did, the artist did. How could that happen? How could that happen? So part of what I wanted to actually call out is when the muse left, it wasn't the muse, it was me. How do you do it? Early in my life, my father set up a lunch with somebody, and he asked an incredible question, which was, what would you do with your life if there were no obstructions? When he asked that question, I started answering with all the obstructions that I saw. I didn't have money, I didn't have this, I didn't have that. I could only see the obstructions. He said, wait a minute, that isn't the question I asked you. What would you do if there were no obstructions? And what he did was free me from that blocked door. Suddenly I could see very clearly, no, I know what I want to do. The issue is the obstructions. And then he said, guess who's making those obstructions? Those obstructions don't exist. They are inside you. So I decided I would make a list. There are 8 here. I'm sure there could be 88 or 800, but this is going to be my list for this conversation. And these were some self-generated obstructions that I could think of. Instead of showing up to work, I can wait for inspiration. So I can kind of disrespect the muse that I don't really show up to say, I'm here. It's like sort of I'll date you, but you have to show up to my door first. No. Doubt the muse. I begin to lose inspiration. Blaspheme. I'll secularize what really has been a sacred trust. I'll see another's path and try to imitate. This is a way to cheapen what is the muse doing? Having a conversation with me individually. I'll seek safety. I'll run from that danger of the creativity. And there's so many ways to do it. I'll say yes to everything except what's really important. So I'll ignore it. I'll lie. I'll be inauthentic to myself. I'll chase the audience instead of chasing the truth of the art and degrade the muse, because the muse is trying to have an honest conversation with me, whatever that muse is. So these are ways that I can block the door. So who can invite this muse back? And here's the equally great news. You can, I can, all of us can. How do we do that? Well, we stop doing what that list was, or whatever your list was, that is not being true to the conversation. So one of the ways we can do that is really show up. And I'm trying to go, because of our time, quick enough on this where I'm rather hoping you might be developing some thoughts about how do you relate to this as a creative? Because hopefully there are going to be time set aside in this conversation for us to hear from your point of view. And you can type them in if you want to in the chat areas, and they'll jump with that, or we'll go another way. But first thing is prioritize. If you're a creative, you're creative. You're not something else. So create before you do the else. The way Tim Ferriss wrote was create before you manage. Don't get to the small things, get to the big thing. The big thing is you're a creative. So prioritize that. Find a way to build that in to your world where it gets to be number one. Then I wrote this to say, bow to the light in the sky, which is to say, what time is it? When am I most creative? If you're most creative at 2 o'clock in the morning, then you're going to have to build your world that way. If you're most creative at 9 a.m., you need to build your world that way. But knowing when the light in the sky is for you as a creative is important, because it gives you the chance to actually relate what you're doing to time. So this is a really important thing. Connect your intention to the time. I'm going to say that again. Connect your intention to the time. Somerset Maugham knew time of day when he was going to sit down and write. It was 9 a.m. So he says, I only write when inspiration strikes. Lucky for me, it strikes at 9 a.m. He sits down at that creative time and he believes the muse will show up. Then bring order to the temple. This is something you can do in your world. What kind of environment helps me create? I heard about one really great artist, and what helps him create is to have a certain kind of music blaring really, really loud in a chaotic environment. That's the world that he creates to create in. For me, that wouldn't work for me. I'm a musician. The world that I would make would not work if I did that. But understanding what my creative environment needs to be, so I'm going to connect my intention to space. And I need to match to my style. Do I need order or chaos? Do I need quiet or loud? Do I need dark or light? Whatever that is, honor that, because that's when the muse will show up. The muse can only intersect in that time and space. So you need a time and you need a space that's conducive to the muse showing up. And then a state of play. So I found this picture and I thought, this is just such fun. Here is this cat and it's into play, but look at that cat, look at the focus. So I wanted to think about the muse as, I need to get past winning and losing. It's not a game of winning and losing, but it is playful. I need to move into engagement, but not into knowing, because if I already know, I'm not allowing space for the muse to speak. So what one of my teachers speaks about is fresh moment mind. This is enough, a fresh moment. And now this moment is fresh and this one. This is a way of thinking beginner's mind as in a new way, just fresh moment. And finally, timeless time. Once I'm here, I drop the clock. So don't put a clock in front of you. You could put an alarm that will go off, and until the alarm goes off, you're in your time, timeless time. And that play, that allows flow to take place. So these to me are states that we can enter into inside play. How can I reinvite the muse? So part of this is, if I see this the way this really works, the way this really, really works, I can understand that my truth is the muse's truth. I can honor the process, and then I can leave the result to another place. So I can really stay inside process. This is really important, because even though I'm working with the result, if I skip ahead, I'm no longer in the now. Whereas if I'm in process, I'm always in the now. And that's the place the muse can interact with me. That's the location place in time and space. I can be good about showing up and start. I can weed this garden, which is to say to create the space, to make the space conducive for me. I can plant the seeds, and then I can trust that the muse will show up. And that commitment, I think, brings the muse back. So one of the other parts is muses are mute. Muses are mute. You are the speaker for the muse. So I created this phrase, not just to see, but to tell. Not just to see life, like this closet filled with journals, but to be willing to show up as the creative artist whose job it is to translate what I've seen into my art, to tell life. So the muse, interestingly enough, cannot do this. Muses being mute raises the level of the creative. The muse needs me. And if I won't show up, the muse will find someone else who will. Because since they can't speak, they need the creative artist to speak for them. So that enters into a relationship to the muse. And I put these down. You might have a different list, but this would be my list, that I have to get not too serious with the muse. That playful state is not a work state as much as it is a play state. And I work into being process oriented. I'm allowing this thing to, I'm going to take a risk. Let me throw this out. Let me see what happens. And then this iteration begins to take place. I enter into an exploration point of view rather than a driving, I've got the answer before I have actually got the answer. I don't know. I'm actually finding out in presence of the muse. It's an expansive state. So there's space. And this is really important. It's not closed up. It's not box-like. It's not even thinking outside the box. There is no box. It's just opening up this kind of space. What could happen here? So there's a possibility point of view. And then for me, because whatever the muse is connected to what it is to be human, but needs a human. So I've got to tell a human truth. That human truth, that's what I need to be able to try to tell. So I've got to show up, and then I've got to make something. And that showing up, that's the honoring of the muse. And then I have to trust the other part, which is that the muse will do what it does. And then, because of this interaction that has happened between the two of us, I thank the muse. So I've kind of opened the muse, but actually to thank the muse. See you tomorrow. We'll see what gets made then. That's what it is for me to work with this unknown process as a creator. And I wish you the best in your side, because this is a really, really not an easy thing to do. We bring all of ourselves, and then there's this other thing that either shows up or doesn't. And it would be my argument, show up at 9 a.m. or show up at your creative time, and then be in a sacred space and see if something sacred doesn't show up to meet you there. My name is John Thomas Dodson. If you want to be in touch with me, that's my email. You can screenshot. The music side of me is just my name.com. I teach mindfulness. So there's Blue Heron Mindfulness Living. That's at my place, and there are things related to that. And also a leadership place, which is just Substance of Leadership, which is the place, and that's a .com. So you've got a way to find me. And now I'm going to quit sharing the screen, and I hope what might happen now is that we'll come to know each other a little bit. So thank you for being here. What shall we do now? Let's see what's in the chat.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And I can also change the settings. So if you actually want to speak and say something, feel free to do that as well.
Yeah, why don't we change those settings and where people can talk? It's so much more truthful. And thank you for having your cameras on, those who are. I'm seeing you there, and it's actually really beautiful because I feel so less alone right then. What's going on for you as a creative? We've got a few minutes. Do you ever have the muse not show up? What do you do? What's your approach? Anybody have one? Because I hope that I'm not the only person who's never had the muse not show up.
Yeah, actually, if you can hear me, sometimes I have the muse not come up, and you know, you call her, she doesn't come, and so what do? I do pretty much what you do, John. I basically show up to work, create the space, and respect the muse, and you know, keep at it until she shows up, and then I thank her very much. The whole process brings me a lot of joy.
I see that Maxime is here, and I bet you just would like to watch and not be asked. But since you're in here, I'm going to ask you, because you have made a number of things. Do you have a muse relationship? And how does creativity work for you with whatever this unknown thing is that speaks to you?
Wow. I think my answer to that question might be annoyingly philosophical. But since you asked, I'll just go for it. I'm not sure that individual consciousness exists. I suspect that we're part of a collective, and perhaps there's actually a theory that consciousness might be an emergent property of every particle in the universe. It just so happens, like the atoms in a magnet are aligned in such a way that magnetism is able to flow through it. Maybe our brains are wired in some way that allows that consciousness to flow. You know, Tesla argued that the brain may be an antenna for consciousness. He wasn't convinced that consciousness actually emerged from the brain. And so my answer is I said it would be annoyingly philosophical, but my answer is that years ago I read that Stoicism actually was at least a religion. And it was a religion whose beliefs incorporated the idea that the universe itself was a godling within the womb of space and time. And that just like an embryo in the womb going through evolutionary stages, we are participating in this evolutionary growth in a, let's say, on a scale that we don't understand, but we feel. And so for me, when I'm trying to create, mostly what I try to do is get out of the way and stop my thinking mind, the pocket calculator part of my mind, from just interrupting the flow. And I try to allow. And whether you see that as a spiritual thing or as just a mechanism of the non-conscious mind working more holistically, I find that really helpful. But I also find that there are some really basic physical things I need to take care of. So I don't tend to get hangry, but I do get hungrumpy. And so if I'm, or sometimes you just need a wee, right? You're feeling tense and you don't know why. And then you realize you're ignoring your body and it's time to go to the bathroom. And then you realize, oh, now I can concentrate. So I try to get enough sleep. I try to get exercise and get out of the way.
I was watching, thank you, Maxime. I was watching Ethan's presentation from a year ago on the YouTube links that you put up that allowed us to see previous sessions. And there were a number of sessions I didn't get to see last time. And so I began to watch one. And Ethan did this thing where he asked people to re-enter a dream that they could remember, and then to kind of mumble out some kind of melody that represented the state of that dream. And then a different kind of consciousness, and to mumble out the kind of melody for that. And this really fascinated me as a way of what he was talking about. Ethan, do I have it right where you called it soft consciousness or something like that? Is that the way you spoke about it?
You know, you just watched it, so your memory may be fresher than mine. But yeah, some kind of soft mind or soft consciousness. But that's totally right. I mean, for me, I do believe in individual consciousness. So Maxime and I may disagree, but I may be less excited about technology, and singularities and so forth. But yeah, no, I find there's a funny quote that I've heard attributed to Stravinsky, which relates to some of the things you were talking about today, which is when somebody asked him when his inspiration strikes, is it when you're walking in the beautiful Russian woods or, whatever. And his answer was, when I'm working.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's wonderful.
So I actually don't work that way, but I do respect it. And I understand for certain, I think we're all archetypally different. I seem to work in this sort of liminal state. And I respect people who work, in a kind of more regimented way too, that can be very effective, and whatever it takes to get you there. I think is going to be different for everybody. That's kind of like what you were talking about time of day. I would say that's true about, state of mind. And,
Absolutely.
it could be walking, it could be, getting so angry and then really tapping into the anger in a way that's uncontrolled. It could be getting really controlled and cleaning up, which I'm doing now to start my day. It's early here, but I'm going off anyway.
You made a comment, and I'll say it as we close, because I'm seeing the clock and I know that they're about to tell us, we're going to have to close this thing up. But Stravinsky made this other comment, which is really beautiful, and it was after Rite of Spring. And the comment was he felt that he had been a vessel for the piece. The piece had come through, and he had been there, but he felt he was a vessel for the traveling of that piece. I think Elgar talks about there's music all around and he grabs a certain amount of it, and then he writes it down. And at one level, one feels really identified with what we make, but in another level, I think there's something that happens that is just so much larger than the little piece of our, small sort of smallest version of mind can really identify. And while I know that I am the one writing down an A flat or thinking of a C major chord, wow, the larger thing of that, when it's over, I look at it and say, I don't know how that came out. I don't know how that happened. And one kind of bows at it. And I think that's why it's good to say thanks, because whatever that is, it's something far bigger than me making this sentence right now.